of the things I wish I really knew way back when was, I wish I'd just known I got this. I really wish I had it nailed and that I could rely on myself and I wasn't going to screw up and it was going to be fine. And I really, really wish I'd had that really firm belief. And when I reflected back on my life, I had amazing parents. I was really, really fortunate. And they brought me up on this, you could do anything you wanted to do. You could be anything you wanted to be. But I suppose on one level, I kind of thought they were just being really kind, and they were going to say that because they loved me, and that's what parents say. And it was interesting because I had a conversation with a lady who I'm going to be working with, and she said, I really don't like it when coaches say, you've got this, because I don't believe I have. I believe that I'm different to everybody else. And that made me think about this even more, because I thought that's really interesting, because actually I remember being in that space where I would just think, well, you don't really know me. So how do you know? How do you know that I've got this? Just because you've got it doesn't mean that I've got it. And I spent so long just being really unsure about that, really being unsure about it. And so that's why it was important for me to maybe share a little bit of my journey today, to maybe point towards how I really know, but not in a presumptuous or patronizing way, but just because we all have it. And it's kind of a given, like you've got a stomach or, a heart or some other organ, you have this too. But so often we don't see that. And one of the, when I reflected back on my journey, so if I share a little bit about my journey, then perhaps that might help a little bit. So I had a fabulous dream when I was 10 years old. I used to watch a program called Crown Court with my mum when I used to come home. I'm sure you might remember that. That just shows how old I am, because it's a really old program. And I used to come home at lunchtime and we used to watch it together, and then I'd go back to school. And I really wanted to be a barrister. That was all I ever really, really wanted to be. And of course, my parents were very working class. They kind of came from nothing, but they believed wholeheartedly you could do anything. And so when I shared this with them, they were like, yeah, of course you can do that. That's no problem at all. And then when I was at sixth form, not at sixth form, at secondary school, so I was about the age my youngest daughter is now, and we had careers advice and things like that. And I was categorically told by the careers advisor that people like me didn't do jobs like that. I went to the wrong school. I was at a failing school. I had the wrong background, the wrong parents, everything was wrong. There was just no way that I was going to get to do this job. So why don't I just set my sights a little lower? I was a bright girl, so I could maybe work in a bank, and work in their machine room, not the cashier, because women didn't do jobs like that, but I could get to, punch the checks in and things like that. That would be really, really good. And I was absolutely gutted about that. And just went into free fall. It was as though somebody had taken away a part of me, had taken away that self-belief, taken away that knowing that I had, that I'd been brought up with. But because I didn't know it was a thing, I thought this teacher knew something about how the world worked that my parents hadn't told me. Like, they'd filled me full of all this guff that wasn't true. And they didn't know about the principles or anything like that. That was just what they believed. That's what they saw. And so I kind of just bummed around school and I didn't have a focus. I didn't have, my dream had been taken away from me. didn't do particularly well, didn't do great at A-levels, got enough to scrape by, and ended up working at local authority. And it was really interesting how I got that job, because my sister saw an advert in a paper and just thought, oh, why don't you do this? And I wasn't even meant to get it. They'd appointed it to somebody else, and then they didn't show up. So then I got the job, which is just really, I mean, this is just kind of how it works, isn't it? You know? And then as I walked into the office, there were a couple of young people there, and there was one that particularly caught my eye. And he was a very kind of good looking guy with a bit of a twinkle in his eye. And unbeknownst to me, he had been the trainee, but he'd failed his exams. He was a bit like me. And then I'd got his job. Right. So you could see how this was, you know, when I look back now, I'm thinking, wow, that was a bit of a dot, because that guy actually ended up being my husband, and we've been married now for 26 years. Now, after a couple of years or so, I shared with him my dream. We'd started going out and got engaged and everything. And I started sharing this dream with him that I really wanted to be a barrister. And he was like, well, why not? You know, by that time, I'd done a housing degree. I'd got a responsible job. I was about 24, 25. And so we had a bit of a running joke that I was going to do this. And he was doing a college course, and he said to me, why don't you do A-level law? You know, and I bet you if you get an A, we'll go to university. We'll give everything up and you go to university. And I was like, this is mad, absolutely mad. But that's what we did. And I got an A. I applied to the top 5 universities. I got into Durham University. At the time, the stats were something like 50,000 students were doing a law degree. 11% of barristers were women. And there were about 300 permanent positions every year for trainee kind of barristers. They're called pupilages and tenancies, a secure thing. There were about 300 of those. So the chances of me actually getting to this were really stupidly small. But I knew I could do it. I knew I could do this. I had no idea what was directing me, but I knew I could do it. And I did it. And I practiced for 10 years. But life isn't really linear, is it? No. It doesn't really work out like that. You see, in my head, when I was thinking about this career, I was thinking, oh, you know, I'm going to buy my husband a boat. We're going to be really, you know, we're going to have this fabulous life. I'm going to be this great barrister. All our problems will be solved. And there was part of me that wanted to say, you know, when we had kids, I wanted to be able to say to them, you could do anything you wanted to do. That was a bit of a driver as well. But I never imagined what would happen. Never, ever envisaged. So I had 3 kids in 3 years. I was about 35 when I had my eldest. We've been told we couldn't have kids, so they were all very kind of a miracle, and then they all came one after the other, so it wasn't really planned that way. And I ended up with chronic fatigue and pneumonia. And it put paid to my career. But that wasn't the full story, because what I'd done, the missing piece of that puzzle, I suppose, in all of that was that I had so much thought in my head about who I was, what I was capable of. I still had that teacher in the back of my mind saying, you shouldn't be doing this job, you're not good enough, you know, you shouldn't be here, you didn't go to the same school as all these people, you know. So I had huge amounts of self-doubt. You know, I would over prepare. You know, I'd get to like 11 o'clock at night with a brief, and then I'd have that thought that came in that said, oh, you've missed something, you always miss something, you know, that you're not going to do a good job. And so I'd start again and prepare it even more. And all of that extra stress, all of that extra mental load, all of that extra thinking, every single thought I thought was true. Every single thought I thought had information that was really telling me about who I was, or what my capability was, or what would happen in the future if I didn't do X, Y, and Z. So my confidence felt to me like it was just non-existent. I would say that I would have a really confident front on the outside, and on the inside, I'd just be just no confidence at all, no self-confidence at all. And that made it really stressful. It made life really stressful. And I would be constantly saying to myself, I'll do that case. And then when I've done that case, I'll feel better. I'll relax. I'll know that I've made it. I'll know I'll be okay. I do that case. I feel great for about 10 seconds. And then it would all kind of come back in again. You know, I take more on and more on to prove to myself that I was capable, that I could do this, you know, and I ended up, you know, as I say, working full time. So I was working about 90, 100 hours a week all across the country. So UK based, with 3 babies at home who I missed terribly, felt hugely guilty because I just wanted to be a part of their lives and I wasn't. And looking back, that's what ultimately, you know, contributed to this downfall, if you want to call it a downfall. But ultimately it just led me to me completely burning out, both physically and emotionally. And I'd really like to say at this point that, oh, I picked up this principles book and my life changed and it was all amazing after that, because we all really want that, don't we? We all want this kind of like instant solution. And no, it wasn't like that at all. I didn't actually come across the principles probably until about 5 years into my recovery. So this happened about 10 years ago. And all that happened, I thought that if I changed my job, if I made the decision that I wasn't going to go back to the bar, I would be okay. That was the problem. My job was the problem. And it wasn't. I changed jobs and most immediately got as stressed as I was before, you know. And then I changed jobs again. So I was there for about 3 years, and then I was kind of like, well, what can I do? You know, what am I interested in? And I'd been very drawn to like holistic therapies and things in my own recovery. And I thought, oh yeah, I'll become a reflexologist, because that cannot be stressful on any level. That can't be stressful. I mean, your clients go to sleep. How stressful can that be? Yeah, right. I made it really stressful. Like, I was probably the most stress reflexologist you'd ever come across. You know, I really tried not to be. So I kind of put on this front of calm, serene. And then as soon as oh my goodness, when's my next client? Oh, and I was just so stressed. Yeah, because what I hadn't learned or appreciated was where my experience was really coming from. And I can see you laughing, but I was always blaming other people. You know, it was the job, it was the clients, it was my poor husband has got the brunt of like the cause of my stress for so many years. You know, it was my kids, it was the weather, it was everything was causing my experience. But me, no, it wasn't me. It had nothing to do with me. But interestingly, what that journey with reflexology kind of taught me was I began to see how almost naturally, and I think, you know, when I say, oh, you've got this, is that I didn't know anything about the principles, but it was like innately this wisdom that we talk about was continually showing me how I really worked. And most of the time I didn't listen, but sometimes I caught glimpses of it. And it would kind of just show me how to write myself. And so I began to become aware of, oh, I have this thinking, and I began to start to let go of certain stressful things. Or I'd have conversations with people and I would say something and think, oh, that's really interesting. I have no idea where that came from. With my clients, particularly, because often they were stressed. And I'd start to coach them, thinking, oh, who am I to coach you? But it would just seem to be coming from somewhere else. Not that I knew that's what it was. I just thought, oh, that's a really good point. Yeah, I might listen to that myself, And I think that's just really interesting how that is always there, and that is, it's always prevalent. I So when I kind of think about, you know, how I know that you've got this, or whoever's listening to how I know you've got this, even though I've never ever met you, and it is the most patronizing thing you could say to somebody when you don't know them, but it is, isn't it, really? That's how I would, if I was first coming to the principles. It is like me saying that you've got something really obvious, like you've got an arm or a stomach or a leg or whatever, it is so much like that. It's just that because we don't see it and we don't recognize it as a thing, we don't look for it. We don't look for it. And when I look back, it was always there. It was always there, in the background. I remember my head of chambers saying to me, "Oh, you're so resourceful. You're so resourceful, Andrea," because I kept doing all these different things to, occupy myself, if you like. And I suppose I always thought that came from your intellect, that because I was a bright person, I would think things up. And, I thought that the fact that I could come up with ideas or thoughts or whatever came from here, came from my brain. But what I began to see, and especially when I was introduced to the principles, is that it's a lot deeper than that. It's a lot deeper than that. It's far more than any of your kind of personal intellect or experience can even come up with. Sometimes, we say things we don't even know where they come from. And I remember when I was being a reflexologist and it occurred to me that I could write a book. I'd never written a book before. I didn't even know how to write a book. And it just kind of, we were on holiday. And I just thought, oh, I've got all these little tips. I could just put all of these in a book. And I at that time, I'd been coming across lots of people who were suffering from stress, who were heading for burnout, a bit like me, had a career and then burnt themselves out. And it just occurred to me. And in those 2 weeks, this whole book came out. And it was called The Feel Good Factor in 30 Days. And it was a tip a day, only a short tip. And I just had this vision of, well, when I was really stressed, I only had like about 30 seconds to work on myself. So it has to be a short tip so that people could just pick it up and go, oh yeah, I can do that today. No, it wasn't a principles book or anything like that. But when I look back now, that was the start of my coaching career. I didn't know it then. And if you'd said to me, oh, you're going to be a coach in 5 years' time, I would have just thought you were bonkers. It would never even occur to me. I didn't even really know it was a thing. You know, I mean, I knew about marketing coaches and business coaches, but not the stuff, not the work that I do now. And it was the most terrifying experience I had. You know, we sent out things like press releases, and I was being interviewed on radios and all sorts of stuff. I mean, you know, and this kind of this innate intelligence that we have was working with both me and my husband. My husband had never ever done anything with like Amazon or uploaded books or anything like that. He was a complete technophobe. And there he was, you know, uploading it on Amazon, finding people to do graphic design, all sorts of stuff. We have no idea where it came from. He'd started writing press releases. It was, you know, mad what we came up with in that space. And from that, I was invited to write a column for our regional paper, which I still do sort of 5 years later, which is lovely and amazing, and I love doing it. And it started me on a completely different journey. It kind of started to open my mind and open my vision, I suppose, because I'd lost that in those period in that 10, well, I suppose it was about 15 years, 14 years of starting the bar and really kind of losing my way, if you like, losing that grounding, getting really sucked into my own personal thinking, which is really scary and quite bleak at times and very kind of dark. I'd lost that knowing that I was going to be okay. I really, really did lose that. But what I didn't realize was that it was always still there. It hadn't gone away. And it was there working in the background, nudging me in different directions, exposing me to different things. So finally, I would bob back up again. And whilst there was still a lot of work to do, and a lot more things that I needed to learn, and a lot more things I needed to see, what I began to realize was that it was there, and I could look to the future, and I could have these insights that would take me in different directions. So yeah, so that was the beginning of my principles journey. And so I hope that's helpful to some of the people who are listening in today.
I'm sure it is, because so many things came to my mind as you were saying that. So because well, lots of things, like I remember my mother often saying when I was little that my little sister, my sister who's a year and a half younger than me, found it so much easier at school. She was so intelligent, and she found it really easy to learn. And I had dyslexia, and so I struggled much more. And so they didn't have, although they also said we could do anything we wanted. I also got the feeling that they didn't have such high expectations for me. But something in me knew that I could do it, that nobody like you, nobody in my family had gone to university, and I knew I was going to go to university, and I was going to find a cure for cancer, and I was going to, you know, so there was this from when I was about 10, right? So there was this thing in me that knew that I was going to do all of that stuff, despite what everybody was saying. And I had the same experience, or not the same exactly, but a very similar experience with careers teachers. I had thought that I was going to be a research scientist to find this cure for cancer. And then I discovered that research scientists spent all their days in laboratories, and I was like, oh my God, I can't do that. And so one of my teachers had suggested to me that I do the subjects so that I could do medicine. And that had never entered my head. It hadn't occurred to me to be a doctor, right? And I was like, oh yeah, okay. And then when I spoke to my careers teachers about this, they were a bit like yours. They weren't saying, they just said, don't even bother to apply. Don't even bother to apply, because this many people apply for the places. There's, so many people are applying for medicine, and it's really, really difficult to get in. And don't apply to London, because that's even more difficult to get in. And in any case, you're a woman, right? You're female. So, and it's so much more difficult for women to get in. Don't even bother to apply. But for me, that was like, right, that means I'm going to do it. So it's really interesting, isn't it? How the difference in how and what we listen to, so I didn't listen to what they said. What I listened to was, I'm going to show them, so I had a thought that was like, I'm going to show them, I'm going to do it anyway, and I'm going to prove that I can do it, whether it was right for me or not. Which is not necessarily a good thing either. And again, I tried really hard. I didn't get in the first year. I didn't get the grades the first year, and I went back and retook some of my A levels to get better grades. And I did get in, and I did go to medical school, and I was like, so what those teachers say is completely irrelevant, and we know that now. I mean, you're going to speak about that, I'm sure, but the difference, it's just so funny, the difference in what we listen to, and we think it's coming from them, but actually it's what we're listening to in us. So really interesting.
And I think as well, it's when you're saying, like, what we listen to, and is so often we do listen to that thinking, that kind of urgent thinking that we have. I mean, and obviously, I thought I followed the thinking of, oh, well, what's the point? They don't believe in me. They obviously know better. So I'm just not going to bother. And when you said, oh, I'm going to show them, that was more of where I was when I was in my mid-20s. But again, I wasn't really, I knew I could do it. I really knew I could do it. But if I'm brutally honest, there was also a part of me that was like, I'm not sure this is right for you. But I was so headstrong in that I've got to show them and getting on that train that pushed me and pushed me and pushed me and pushed me. And I did do it, and I don't regret it at all. And I think that's the wonderful thing about life, is that even if you are a bit headstrong and you go off in a direction, this kind of, whatever we want to call it, kind of steers you back on course again. But the more we kind of listen to that gut feeling, if you like, because I think that's how most of us would experience it, a kind of, and I made decisions, in my past. I remember, like, my first pupillage, it was like somebody was putting the brakes on and saying, do not accept this on any circumstances, do not accept this. But I did, because I kept thinking, well, you don't get many of them, you're likely to get tenancy, It was horrendous. And I ended up shifting to a different chambers, which was much better, and it was amazing, and I had a fantastic career there, but I didn't want to listen to it, because my head was filling up of now, if I'd kind of trusted that, I don't know, maybe it would have been different, maybe not, I don't know. But it was there. It was definitely there.
Yeah, I had the set. Well, I had, when I did, after my first term at medical school, I hated it. And I went home to my parents at Christmas, and I said, right, that's it. I am not going back. I'm going to India to be a yogi. And my mother was really good, actually, because she's like, okay, all right, dear, if that's what you want to do. Knowing full well that I hadn't, in those days, there was no internet, I had no idea how to travel. I had no idea, I had no idea how to be a yogi in India, or what that meant, really. But I, that was actually quite a strong urge in me. But of course, I listened to all the thinking of, oh, you can't do that, and how you don't even know how to do that, and went back to medical school, and finished. but it's interesting that we do get, I mean, where did that come from? That I'm going to be a yogi. And I was interested in yoga and meditation and so on. Yeah. But it was quite a strong urge in me to go and do that. I just had no clue how to do it. And all these voices were saying, yeah, you can't do that. And that would be too difficult. And how are you going to do it? And you should finish this anyway. And so I listened to that. And eventually, as you say, you get guided back to anyway. So there isn't any wrong decision.
Oh no. And what occurred to me when you were talking there was, I think it was Steve Jobs who said, I mean, it's a really famous quote, that you can't connect the dots going forward, you can only connect them going backwards, and you have to trust in something. The dots will be connected in some way. And I love that, I love the fact that now I'm kind of, nearing my 50th year, and I look back and I'm like, oh yeah, I can see how even my housing career, which was 6 years long, and a lot of the clients that I work with are, housing organizations of one shape or form, and because I know that industry, it's really, really interesting that, oh, okay, well, that's kind of come full circle. And it's almost like we go on this journey collecting skills and exposed to different things, and for a reason that we may not even know. But even when things have gone really, really wrong, and I've made really bad decisions, based on this head stuff, if you like, even they have turned out to be useful in some way for my journey going on. So there, as you say, there have been no wrong decisions in anything that I've done.
And the other thing that struck me when you were talking was about, I was talking on one of these sessions the other day to another doctor who also had given up medicine. But we were also talking about what would have happened if we had known about the principles, if we'd understood the principles while we were in what seemed like a really stressful situation. And it seemed like it was the being a doctor that was causing the stress, in the same way that you being a barrister was the stress. And it doesn't mean that everyone has to leave medicine or everyone has to leave doing law if they're stressed, because if you understand where the stress is really coming from, your whole experience of that career can be different. What would you say about that?
Oh, absolutely. When I look back, I think my experience would have been completely different if I'd had this understanding. Completely. My self-doubt started at university, because I went to a very traditional university with predominantly people who were supremely confident about themselves, and it was their right to be there. And there was me, who had literally scraped in on the sidelines. And so my self-doubt started then. What I didn't realize, I suppose, back then, was that I thought the thinking that I was doing about myself and about my ability and about other people and what they thought about me was a fact. I thought it was true. So if I thought to myself, they're better than me, that was a fact. That wasn't just an insecure thought. That was something I had to rely on. I had to take it into account, and any decision that I made would have to take account for that. Now, when I think about it, it was like it was a seed. And so those thoughts just grew and grew and grew as I went through university and bar school and pupillage and things. I just gathered more and more evidence that other people were better than me, and that I wasn't, and that I couldn't rely on myself as much. And, I'd have to double check everything. And it, to a point where it was just this myriad of doubtful, insecure thinking about everything. Absolutely. I mean, my husband used to say I could get stressed opening a packet of crisps, because I'd be worried about something about it, And it was because I jumped on every single thought that popped into my head. Every single thought. Every single thought was real to me. Every single thought about me, anyway, that I had was real about me. And I would describe myself as having lost my self-confidence. But what I failed to see at that stage is that it's not something you can lose. It isn't something you can lose. Yeah, it's not a, and we talk about mindset. It's not a mindset. Confidence isn't a mindset thing, right? We don't have to do confidence. We don't have to. And I used to do those things, you know, when you stand in front of the mirror and you go, yes, I am a confident, strong woman, you know, and I think that's a pile of rubbish. You know, that's where I didn't believe it because it wasn't an intellectual thing. It wasn't something that I could talk myself into. It didn't come from there. All I ended up doing was having an argument in my head. But when I began to see as a fact that I was confident, I was confidence, I had confidence within me naturally. It just naturally occurred within me. It was part of who I was. It was part of my true nature. Then the thinking I was doing started to make a little bit less sense. You know, because it was like somebody saying to me, oh, you know, it was like me saying to myself, oh, I don't have a left arm, you know, and hiding it behind my back and going, look, I have no left arm. I can't do anything without my left arm because I don't have a left arm, you know. And then somebody pointing out to me, oh, you've just been hiding it. It's here. It's been there all the time. And then a thought popping into my head saying, you don't have a left arm. And I'd be going, yeah, I do. It's here. You know, it was almost as obvious as that when I began to see it. So if I'd had that, not just that one piece of knowledge way back in my 20s, I may not have ended up still being a barrister. I may not have carried on. I don't know. But I think I would have been a lot less worried and stressed and insecure. I would have worked a lot, not less harder, but I would have been a lot more efficient in my working because I wouldn't have had to do everything twice over and, you know, stop and check everything because I knew I had this.
Yeah, that just reminds me of thought when I was similar when I was a junior doctor, was so much listening to all that thought of have you done enough and did you do, and believing that I had to worry because if I didn't worry, I wouldn't do everything that I needed to do.
Yeah.
That if I didn't listen to all that thought about, oh, have you done this and have you done that and should you do this, and actually now I know that if I had realized that those were just thoughts that I didn't have to take seriously and I didn't have to listen to, that I would have been a lot calmer and a lot more in touch with my resourcefulness. I wouldn't have been more resourceful because I am resourceful, but I would have been able to just do what needed doing without listening to all that thought that was causing me the stress.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you say that as well, because we do get hooked up into that cycle of feeling that we need to have this incessant chatter of pressure in order for us to do things. You know, I was having a conversation last night with a lady, so I was doing a talk, and she was saying, but if I don't have it, I won't do the work. If I don't tell myself I have to do it and I have to do it and I have to do it, I won't get it done. And when we begin to see that actually, yeah, we do, and we get it done a lot quicker because we're not constantly distracted. It's like having an audience in our head kind of going, and we're listening to them instead of actually just getting on and doing what we need to do. And that we don't need it. You know, we have that natural motivation to just want to get on and do stuff.
So yeah. So how did you come across this understanding then? You haven't told us what happened.
Okay, what happened? But it was interesting, really. As things happen, and we've been talking about, you know, kind of these weird things that kind of happen. I have a friend who lives in Scotland, and she came down for New Year, and she was flicking on her phone, and she said to me, oh, Ali Campbell has got a freebie on. Do you want to go? Now, I thought she was talking about UB40. And I was like, why on earth would I want to go and see UB40? I don't want to go and see that. And she's like, no, you don't understand. No, you've got to come and see him. So I went to see, he does like a free day, he does it every year. And so I went up and I saw him. And from that, I just released my book. And I'd also started like an online magazine for therapists. That was another idea that I'd had, which was brilliant. And actually, I learned so much tech doing it, which is now really useful for me. So that was another kind of like, oh yeah, that's why I had to do that, Jenny. And I'd asked him if I could interview him, and he was absolutely lovely about it. And I actually ended up doing his NLP course. And I remember the conversation with my husband, and I said to him, I have no idea why I have to do this. It was for me at that time a huge amount of money. I'd never done anything like it before. And I said, but I think this could be really useful. I think it could be useful for us as a family, but maybe I'll use it in the future. I don't know. So that was in 2014. And I think at that time, Ali had recently done worked with Michael Neal. I think he'd done Super Coach and stuff like that. So he was kind of like interweaving all this principle stuff into the program. And I just thought, wow, this is really interesting. And I bought Michael Neal's book and I read it. And I didn't really, I got the thought bit, but the rest of the stuff, I thought it was far too complicated, if I'm honest. I really needed fixing. I mean, my head really needed, I was broken, I was truly broken. And so I sat in that space for a long time of being broken. But there was something about the principles that just kept pulling me back. It just fascinated me. And so I kept reading Michael's book, and every time I read it, I heard a little bit more, which is just lovely. And I love the way that this works, And then I brought a book by Thomas Kelly, and read that and thought, and reread Michael's book and and suddenly, the mist started to settle a little bit. And then I got Somebody Should Have Told Us, which is one of my all-time favorite books. And that's when the journey started. In 2015, I started to do some more work and worked with Ali and some various other people as well. But I think for me, it was, and I trained at the time I was training in other modalities. So I trained in like hypnotherapy, did more NLP and EFT and stuff like that. I just kept being brought back to the principles, and people would come to me for hypnotherapy and we'd end up having a principles conversation. And I'd be like, I have no idea where that came from. And so finally I gave up and just said, right, no, this is what I'm going to do. It was like coming out of the coaching closet and saying, no, this is it. The principles for me was just so true for me. It felt so true. And every time I had a conversation, it gave so much. This innate intelligence would give so much. Often things I needed to hear as well. So they would give us a double whammy. My client and myself would learn something, which is just lovely. And what I love about it, what's coming to me, and what I love about it is that when I share it with people, they say along the lines of, they don't say the same words, but I kind of know this. And when they start to see it, they can see how it has been operating throughout their lives, their whole lives. And it has been present. And on some level, they've kind of been aware, but they just didn't know what it was.
It's very funny because practically every single person that I have spoken to on this series, which is like getting on for 80 now,
Wow.
is everybody practically has said the same thing. It's like, I heard about the principles and I read a book or I heard someone speak and I didn't quite get it. I heard something, but I didn't quite get it. And then I read it again, or then I listened again, and then I listened, and then I had to go back and read it again. Well, how many books do you do that with? But every single person has said that. I went back and I did it. I was the same. I did it with the first book I ever saw was Somebody Should Have Told Us. And I didn't get it the first time either. And the second time I read it, I was like, oh my God, that's what it means. It means all these feelings that I've been taking seriously, all these thoughts that I've been taking seriously. And especially for me, it was the feelings. I had been putting a meaning on uncomfortable feelings. If I had uncomfortable feelings, that meant something important was happening and I needed to do something about it. It meant something was wrong in my life, something was wrong on the outside, and I needed to do something about it. Or something was wrong with a thought in my head and I needed to do something about it. I needed to change it. And I suddenly realized, oh, it doesn't mean that at all. It just means I'm having a thought and in a minute I'll have another one.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean I have to do anything at all, which was huge for me. And then, of course, I just kept reading some more, but it's just everybody says that. So if there are people listening to this and it's not making sense at the moment, then just keep watching and just keep listening and, listen to more of these and so on. So,
yeah, I think that's a really important point. And what came to me when you were talking about that is I remember reading the relationship handbook very early on. And that made a huge impact on me because I started to really see the difference in my what we would term as levels of consciousness. And often I describe it to people who are new to the principles as mood, and I always thought when I was in a bad mood or my husband was in a bad, I didn't see it as a bad mood. I just saw all this stuff was coming out, and when you're in a relationship, it's like, you're showing your true feelings. This is how I really feel. You're the worst person in the world. I don't know why I married you. My life would be so much better. All of this stuff. And I would think that was really true and really real. And then I'd have to make decisions on that. And I think it was true in me. If I was thinking all this awful stuff, then I had to do something about it. I had to act on it, or had to mitigate it in some way, or take some action or have some therapy. I shouldn't be having these thoughts, so it was almost like we had a range of different moods, but there were like these shouldn't happen moods. There's something wrong with you type mood. You should always be happy and bouncy and like Tigger, and we can't be Eeyore. Eeyore's no, must never be like Eeyore. Bad, Andrea, for being like Eeyore. Go get more therapy. And what the principles did for me was like, oh my goodness, you're a human being. Welcome to the club. Welcome to our world, because we all have these things called levels of consciousness. We all have them. Every single person can be grumpy. We can all be Eeyore, and we can all be Tigger, and we can be Winnie the Pooh, who's somewhere in the middle. That's fine. And actually, we have to have all these different moods, because if we weren't Eeyore, how would we know we were Tigger? We just wouldn't know. We just wouldn't know. And when I began to see that actually, yeah, I do some pretty poor, horrible thinking sometimes, but all that's telling me is where my state of mind is. It doesn't tell me who I am. It doesn't mean I'm broken. It doesn't mean I have to fix myself. It just means I've got some really rubbishy thinking in my head, but it will just pass. I don't have to do anything. I don't have to stand on my head or repeat 7 I am amazing or anything like that. It would just pass on its own. And knowing that that was normal was like, oh my word. You mean he's not going to leave me? You mean I don't have to leave him, And now we kind of just have a laugh about it. If one of us is moody or whatever, it's like, oh, just a mardy bum, just get over it, go and watch some cricket or whatever occurs to you. But we don't take it so seriously as we used to. And that was a real gift for me, a massive gift for me and my family.
Yes, it would certainly have made a difference in my marriage, I'm sure.
Yeah. And it's fabulous for teenagers. If anybody is listening, I know this is the same for young people, but it's fabulous to know that your mood can swing, and that's okay. And your friends' moods can swing, and that's okay, you know?
Yes, it's very helpful to know that you don't have to take your parents' moods seriously, that it's nothing to do with you.
Totally.
That is really...
Totally. And I wish I'd known that with my mum. My mum was a blesser, a similar age as I was when she had teens, you know, menopause and all of that. And, you know, I wish I hadn't taken her so seriously when I was growing up. And so taking it to heart, you know, because looking back, she was just in a bad mood. She was grumpy. She didn't mean stuff. But how often do we hold on to that and keep repeating it to ourselves? And we just don't need to.
Yeah, that's right. So tell us a bit more about what you're doing now, Andrea.
So now life's really good, and I'm not burnt out, and I don't get stressed, and I smile so much more than I used to, which is amazing. So I coach full time now. I predominantly coach professional people who are working full time, mainly because I kind of understand the journey that they're going on. So I tend to attract those people into my business. And I also work a lot with entrepreneurs and business owners, because I've also walked that path as well. And so that's really good. And I do stuff on social media, and I have online groups, and I love just going with the flow of how the business is evolving and taking me in directions and showing me opportunities, and just really following that. And you know, just following what I call the breadcrumbs. You know, you just have a few little as long as I know the next few steps, I'm not worried about where it's going to lead, because I know now that I don't need to worry about that. All I need to know is my next few steps, and as long as I follow the next few steps that are right for me, then it'll all be good. It will be what it needs to be. So yeah. And I have a new podcast as well, which I'm really excited about. That's been really good.
So it's much more exciting that way anyway, isn't it? We can't possibly know what's going to happen. And it's more exciting anyway, not knowing what's going to happen. So, yeah. So before if there's anything else, you know, that you'd like to say before we wrap up, then just before you do that, if anyone wants to ask questions, they can post them underneath the video, or they can get in touch with you directly through our links on the website, which will also be underneath the video. So is there anything else that you would like to share to finish off, or is that it?
I think I'm done. I think what's coming to me is if anyone is listening to this, follow your gut, follow your instinct as to what the next step is. You know, you will be bombarded, I'm sure, by very well-meaning, loving people who care about you, saying to you, oh, you need to do this, 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 because they're worried and they're concerned about your future. And rightly so, we all do that, very well-meaning. But if something feels really right for you, or something doesn't feel right for you, then that really is your best guide. It really, really, truly is your best guide. And all you need to do is know your next couple of steps. And that's it. The rest will take care of itself.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Andrea. This has been really, really, really good. And I'm sure lots of people are going to get lots out of it too. So thanks very much for being here.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
And I'll see you again soon.
Okay, take care now. Take care. Bye-bye.